We used to have conversations about, oh, did you realize the part of that table was manufactured by a company down the road? And now you're like, do you realize you're able to surf that, website on your phone because fabricators have helped build the infrastructure to support all that activity. It's next time you're looking at your funny video about furry cats or something, thank your local fabricator.
Speak for yourself, Daniel. While you're driving your Yugo.
Right? Exactly. There you go.
We're not living in the past around here. Don't get us wrong.
No, we're hitting the groove. Everybody's joining it.
Discover your path to leadership excellence at the FMA annual meeting, February 27th to the 29th in Clearwater, Florida. This exclusive event offers a unique opportunity to connect with prominent figures in the fabrication and metals industries, enabling the exchange of ideas, collaborative solutions to business challenges, and the cultivation of strategic relationships. Plot your course for success in 2024 and beyond by attending the FMA annual meeting. Visit fmamfg.org for all the details.
Hello, Dan Davis from the Fabricator and Lincoln Bruner, also from the Fabricator and
Good
Tube and
afternoon.
Pipe Journal.
That's
How
right.
are you?
I'm great.
Thanks for joining us today. We have a good conversation coming up with Christian Streu, Chief Financial Officer of the partner companies. They are a large company made up of smaller and mid-sized fab and machine shops.
And from FotoFab, we have Charles Cohen.
Correct. President, and they're a company specializing in photo etching right on Belmont Avenue in the city of Chicago. But during our conversation, we actually touched upon, I don't even know how we got to the point of the conversation, but a reference was made.
A Yugo.
Yeah, a reference was made to a Yugo and then to a Hyundai Excel, early model 1980s.
A Hyundai Pony.
Hyundai Pony, not the Excel.
Which you own?
Correct.
Did you own a pony?
So we're this is going to evolve into a conversation about first cars. But when I was graduating high school, I was the lucky recipient of a car from my parents, and my dad test drove a Hyundai Pony or Excel or whatever it was back then that they were selling at Levis Hyundai. Shout out for a dead automobile dealership. And he was not impressed at the time with the Hyundai, so I ended up with a two-seater Honda CRX, which I thoroughly enjoyed and collected many speeding tickets in. So thoroughly enjoyed that.
30 miles an hour over the limit?
Yeah, that
40?
was coming out of New Orleans on a late. Well, it's not Sunday morning. It was more Monday morning, Sunday into Monday. I think it was St. James Parish doing 95 and a 55.
Ooh.
So
I could see that thing ripping up 90 miles per hour.
Policeman goes, what exactly were you doing 95? I'm like, I just want to go home, sorry.
Well, you're not going home just yet, son.
I was able to avoid a charge of criminal, what do they used to call it?
Reckless driving?
Yeah, like driving criminally insane or something like that. I think there's something on the books like with that charge.
What year was this?
Huh?
What year is this?
Oh, so I hadn't graduated yet, so it's probably about 88.
Oh, yeah, there were no laws back then.
In St. James Parish there was. To this day, probably same guy's probably still waiting at the end of the bridge coming into Laplace. And I don't think that's St. James, but whatever. So anyway, other first cars that we had.
Oh,
you mentioned yours. You actually...
I had a great first car. My father was kind enough to purchase it for $2,000 right around 1988. It was a 1966 Ford Galaxy with a 352 V8. Could seat 3 or 4 friends comfortably in the back seat, which we made ample use of on the way back.
That looks like something you roll up on a bunch of socias on and just kick their ass.
Yeah. Listening to what we described as doo-wop.
Doo-wop, yes. Little.
So Lincoln, Soda Pop,
Frankie
and Pony
Valli
Boy.
and the Four Seasons going on.
Yep. Lincoln had a roll of cigarettes.
That's right.
Cigarettes rolled up in his sleeve.
You guys want a drag race or something, Huh?
Why are you snapping at me?
What are you doing? Yeah, it was a great car. It was fun.
That's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about for you, Gareth.
I had a 1989 Chevy Nova.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It didn't last the whole year I had it. It died in the middle of the winter on the way to school once.
Like at Boylan High School.
Yep.
Like a slow death, like...
It stopped at a stoplight and just
Just
Went
gave
to
up the
sleep
ghost.
forever.
Went to sleep forever.
And my best friend drove right by me, honking and laughing. I was like,
Thanks, dude.
he turned back around after he stopped at Hardee's to get some hash browns.
That's what friends are for.
But that car was a little tank. I was telling Brandon before this that
Before it died.
I once was turning left, got rear-ended by a small pickup truck, and crunched the entire front end of that pickup truck. My car unscathed. It had like a heavy-duty rubberized bumper cover in the back that just
It's a shame that it died.
absorbed all of it. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It's a shame. You should have gone in demolition derby.
It was like the Homer Simpson of cars. You just beat it to death and it suffers no ill effects.
It was a great little car.
Wow.
Brandon, what
it
we talking
also-
about for you? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I also got voted worst car my senior year.
Jeez, that's cold, man.
Well, if it
But
died,
since the car
yeah.
didn't exist, I had to hold up a hubcap for the picture.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Even better.
I like Brandon's.
Yeah, I had a 1987 Chevy Beretta. Had it for about 3 months before I rear-ended a Cadillac, and my car didn't make it through it.
So you laughed earlier when Gareth pulled up a picture of the Beretta, and it says the website called it a classic latchkey kid car.
Were you a
Do
latchkey
you care
kid?
to elaborate?
Very much so.
Were you?
Actually, I had the conversation with my mom this morning about being a latchkey kid.
There you go.
How ironic.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes, a Beretta was very much a familiar sight.
Oh yeah. It was a
The 90s,
good-
right? Late 90s?
Oh, yeah.
it's a good affordable car.
Early 2000s.
Okay.
Now that I look at it, that just says 90s.
It says 90s, but it says affordable 90s, right? I mean, a lot of people had them because it was like
Yeah.
a great middle class car.
You could get it for 10K back then.
Yeah.
So now that'll get you a 1995 Corolla
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
450,000 miles on it.
Don't knock it. That is hard.
All right. Well, I guess we consider Lincoln the winner in this
Hey,
contest.
in this one,
Yeah.
Yes.
finally, I won some.
So,
only because he'll beat us up if we don't say that.
yes. I mean,
He'll get his
cool.
brass knuckles out.
Be cool.
Be cool, man.
I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Stay tuned for our chat with the partner companies.
It's that time of year again. Time for all students pursuing a manufacturing-related degree in a 2 or 4-year program to apply for a scholarship from FMA's foundation, Nuts, Bolts, and Thingamajigs. Eligible students can receive up to $3,500 per year for their program. Applications for fall 2024 are being accepted until March 31st. Get all the details and apply today at fmamfg.org. And now, back to the episode.
Today's guest, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. We have Christian Streu, who is Chief Financial Officer of the partner companies. And within the partner companies is a company called FotoFab. And we have Charles Cohen, who is the leader of that organization. And today we've spent a lot of time on the podcast talking with small individual fabricators. And it's always a good conversation to
been
talk
fun.
about
It's been a
the
lot of
people
fun.
who are building things. Well, these folks have built a lot. And so it's almost the other end of the spectrum. A large company with a large upside, but still made up of smaller to mid-sized companies who are probably very familiar to a lot of our audience. So it's going to be a fun conversation. Christian, can you give our audience an idea of just who the partner companies are and the history behind it?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And thanks for having us here.
Oh, no problem.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
So the partner company was formed in 2010. It was co-founded by Dan Brumlik and Scott Bekemeyer. And our first acquisition was FotoFab here in Chicago, which is run by Charlie Cohen here to my left. So it'll be great to hear some of his perspective of those very early days. Just a little bit of background on myself. I did join the company in 2020, coming from the capital side of the world. Although I've been working with Dan and Scott and Charlie for, about coming up on 15 years here, providing, financing from the beginning and then flipping over to the other side of the table.
So you had worked with them as a banker capacity.
Exactly.
And come over.
Yeah, exactly right. So TPC is a global advanced manufacturer consisting, as you mentioned, of multi-site capabilities. We have got 10 individual brands that we're currently managing and 13 plants 10 of which are here in the U.S., but we also have footprint in the U.K., China, and most recently in Mexico, which has been an exciting investment thesis for us as onshoring has become more and more important to the world in TPC and manufacturing.
Right.
And why particularly Mexico at this juncture?
Well, we learned something early with FotoFab. It's easier to sell our customers something that they want rather than what we want to sell. And our customers told us, we're disinvesting, in the overseas, particularly Far East and China manufacturing plants. We want to nearshore and simplify the supply chain, and so that was something we reacted with.
Very good.
Yeah. And how did FotoFab become the first investment for the partner companies?
Well, that's a great question to ask Charlie. He had ringside seats. So.
There you go. So Dan Brumlik and Scott Bekemeyer were involved with FotoFab before the acquisition for a few years with the goal of buying FotoFab. Working with FotoFab directly in a capacity of sales marketing role, eventually bought FotoFab in 2010. With Dan Scott and some of our current investors were involved then and are involved in a much larger way right now. So it just kind of started with, hey, Dan Scott being very entrepreneurial, wanted to buy some niche manufacturing companies, and FotoFab was a great company to start with.
Yeah. So in a general sense, and I think, we're going to talk about context against which the partner companies and FotoFab is currently operating with in terms of the manufacturing environment. But, I'm currently working on a story where we're talking about Gen Z entering the industry and the juxtaposition of that conversation are the older people making room for them. Obviously, there's a changing of the guard, I think, in terms of generational terms, not only in manufacturing, but in society. With people, company owners looking to get out, is that kind of created an opportunity for the partner companies to go find companies similar to FotoFab? Not necessarily that the context of when that deal took place in 2010 and before, but is it an environment that is ripe for companies like maybe the partner companies to consolidate and bring together manufacturing capabilities?
Certainly, yeah. So that informs our M&A strategy, which we're certainly a highly acquisitive company. We tend to buy 2 to 3 companies a year. And most of our sellers are your viewership, right? So it's closely held or family owned entrepreneurs who've built a business, great business over 30, 40 years, and either looking for that monetary exit or just don't have a clear sort of succession option. And really there's two primary paths there. If you don't want to shut the business down, which obviously is the unlikely scenario, it's private equity or groups like ours, right? And so when we enter those conversations, the first thing that we tell sellers is that we're not private equity. We're a long-term manufacturing platform. We buy companies for their teams. We look to invest in those teams and really enable them to sort of grow beyond, maybe where they're currently at by bringing capital and operational expertise, HR expertise, et cetera, to really scale and grow those businesses. But we have no, sort of intent to sell those companies over sort of a 3 to 5 year period like a typical private equity firm would.
Right. You're not.
And we have history behind that. So in selling that, look at these other companies.
Right.
They're still operational. Management staff is the same.
Yeah.
So we're saying it and proving it.
You've got street cred to prove what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about the makeup of the companies that that you would ideally target for an acquisition. What sort of capabilities do they have? What sort of markets are they serving? I mean, how do you strategize that?
Yeah. So I referenced some early learnings that the organization got through our initial acquisition with FotoFab. So that it's easier to sell customers what they want rather than what we got, right? And so our customers inform our acquisition strategy to a large degree. They tell us what capabilities they're either having a hard time sourcing, maybe it's an unreliable market, and we try to bring more efficiency to that market by bringing it inside the TPC house and continue to sort of cross sell that way.
I like that.
Can you describe from FotoFab's perspective how the existence within the partner company's family has evolved? What would have been some of the benefits, maybe some of the challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question because the evolution has been substantial, especially in the last few years with the acceleration of acquisitions. Going back, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were all on an island. running independently. Now there's these companies we get together, we talk, we have multiple companies dealing in the same market space, same operational type manufacturing process, so we're leveraging that knowledge to improve. We have the TPC platform that has great knowledge, like financing, HR, operation that we'll rely on. So it's been we've changed from small to a much larger acting company, and we've improved because of that.
How do you go about maximizing what we were talking about before, that complementary nature of the relationships within the company? How do you go about maintaining that and maximizing that?
So let me take first cut at that by first saying that we do remain pretty end market disciplined. So aerospace, and we break it down into 4 sort of key categories: A&D, aerospace and defense, medical, clean energy, and technology. Okay. And so that creates a natural synergy in the types of products that we're selling.
Right.
And then you extrapolate that out over Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that are our customers. Their product and engineering needs are vast and complex. And so the more ideas and more solutions that we can bring into a room to an engineering team, the more valuable of a partner we are. Right. And hopefully unlock those opportunities to continue to cross-sell across the platform.
Yeah.
And just as an example, we were talking about a customer we have. I was talking with a customer and, telling them about our product, and they put a part on a table saying, hey, what about this, Michael? I can't make that, but I have a company. One of my sister companies, that's their thing. So another advantage that we're taking care of in bringing all these companies together.
Right. So the siblings are scratching each other's backs a little bit better.
Quite a bit.
Has that made it easier to kind of grow organically, just from a FotoFab perspective?
With it, we become more important to our customers,
right?
And we're able to give them more, and not just it's just not a one-way street. We're able to help them out,
and not having to maybe make that investment yourself and trying to find square footage and then people to support that. Yeah. Has it created pathways for maybe some of your employees to where, the one location is not necessarily the ceiling, that they might have an opportunity to kind of grow elsewhere?
It's a challenge as a small company where you don't have those opportunities. Okay, somebody, you have a 20-some-year-old, wanting to grow, and it's like, okay, I have this building here with 50 people in here. What do I see doing in 10 years? I'm not going to be here, but now there are opportunities, and you can maybe talk about what we've seen with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have, we're 3 years into this TPC branding coalescing idea, right? But already we have examples of bringing, floor production managers to GM roles, or as it relates to sort of site level financial professionals, to Charlie's point, where the ceiling may have been this one particular site. Now we have a larger organization in a way that they can contribute in ways that they haven't before, and that those are 2 examples, but it sort of runs the whole gamut of being able to plug and play the best talent that we have into the opportunities that we're able to surface.
Yeah,
right.
What functions are centralized within TPC? That does each facility have a sales effort, or is that kind of centralized?
Each company does have a sales effort, or each site has a sales effort. We also have coordinated sales efforts that come out of the platform as well, and so those are coordinated by our co-CEOs, certainly. We also have group presidents that run sub-portfolios of TPC that, the more that we can create that connective tissue and increase the communication of who's working on what opportunities, the more that we can, unlock, again, those cross-sell opportunities.
I like that concept of connective tissue, especially when it comes to like business strategy. And I'm curious about how your international companies play off of your core here in the United States. I mean, how are you working with them to increase business for both?
Yeah. So certainly nearshoring is a very strong tailwind for that.
Absolutely.
When you have a sales team and boots on the ground in market, in the 3 major markets, we do sell obviously U.S. for U.S. and Europe for Europe, but also China for China, which is a somewhat unique capability for a U.S.-based company.
Yeah, talk about that.
So it's interesting. It's a growing segment of our Suzhou-based plant, and we're in technologies such as medical and technology in obviously one of the largest economies there is in the world.
Second largest in the world, yeah.
So that's been a very exciting path we've continued to invest in as well.
I'm curious in that regard, if we look at FotoFab, what sort of markets are you able to tap into that you might not being part of TPC?
We've been in quite a bit of markets, but it allows credibility. Because what happens is we're in markets and we're talking about FotoFab capabilities. As I mentioned, we have more capabilities, but we also have backup capabilities if we were to have some environmental or crisis issues within the plant.
Right.
So we just allow credibility of a much larger company dealing with all aspects of the business because we have the backing of TPC and the knowledge of TPC dealing with environmental issues, HR issues. We're just much more of a powerful, more intelligent company.
Can you describe what exactly FotoFab does? Because we've covered photo etching a little bit in the Fabricator, but it's really unique in the sense of we don't do it regularly coverage, and also touch upon where that redundancy may exist within the family of companies to back y'all up.
Certainly, it's certainly a unique process. And when we talk with customers, we're not saying, "Hey, we're the best chemical etcher out there." We're explaining what chemical etching is.
Right.
Engineers, it's just not taught. It's not in the book. So
why not?
Engineers aren't familiar with it. It's a niche process.
Sure.
I'm guessing there's roughly 10, 12 domestic manufacturers in the country.
That few.
Some of the large companies, the large electronic companies, they'll have in-house. Some of the aerospace companies will have in-house as well. But typically smaller companies, they're dealing with manufacturing chemical etch.
And how's that work? Real thin?
Very, very thin. We can go down to 0002.
Wow.
Max is 1/8 of an inch.
Wow.
And what we're doing is we're coating the metal with a light-sensitive film, and we're exposing to light to harden. Where it stays soft, we're removing, have exposed metal, put it to an acid bath. Acid eats away, hold very tight tolerances, and eats away from the top and the bottom. And you have a feature, or you can do it from the top, where you have just a purely etched feature versus a hole.
Wow.
And tight tolerance is a very quick process.
The genesis of it is very old, right?
Centuries.
Yeah.
Centuries. It goes back. If you go to the museums downtown, you go to the room with all the armor.
Yeah.
That's all chemically etched on the armor. Wow. They're using beeswax and different type of acids to do that. So it goes back centuries.
Isn't that fascinating?
It is amazing how the legacy of this profession could go back centuries.
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, I imagine what one of those craftsmen from back in that day would occur if they wandered into a modern shop. So there's also other photo etching capabilities within TPC?
Yeah, so Lincoln, you had asked about how do the companies coordinate. It's not just across sort of the sales end of it, and Photo Etch is really a good example of how we do that.
Okay.
So FotoFab, for example, is really, really strong at rapid prototyping.
Okay.
You can go print to part in
a day.
Wow.
Wow.
And so we have that all the way at the development end, and then sort of everything between that and our site in Milford, Massachusetts, PEI, which is doing tens of thousands of part runs. So we can take something from design to design for commercialization and scalability, and sort of take that product all the way through its life cycle.
Wow. Additionally, different sites work with different materials. We have one site works with some exotics, molybdenum, tungsten.
Okay.
They specialize in that.
Wow.
Okay. And what end use markets is that for?
A lot of medical.
Okay. All right.
In products?
Mm-hmm.
Are we
devices?
Oh,
medical
okay.
devices.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Some implantables as well.
Okay.
Wow.
You didn't mention titanium, which is certainly a
aerospace.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a focus of our investment in the last couple of years for sure. Mm-hmm. So titanium, the way that we use it goes into the hydrogen electrolyzer market. So the bipolar plates that are going into hydrogen electrolyzer technologies, which are sort of enabling the hydrogen economy.
So that's so funny in the sense that here's a conversation about at the focus metal. But now you touch upon a segment you're serving, And for people who are not overly familiar with the trappings or the inner workings of new energy type developments, all I hear is electric. And yet this is happening. So where's some of this activity taking place? And who, like, is it like the delivery companies that are involved with this? What are some of the motivators?
Yeah. Well, so taking a zoomed out sort of view first, it is a focus of incentive packages. The IRA is a particular one that comes to mind. The Inflation Reduction Act. That's a $370 billion program. $100 billion of that is earmarked for hydrogen generation for power purposes.
Oh, okay.
And so it's the largest, some of the largest companies in the world, a lot of energy companies certainly, but also engine manufacturers as they're looking towards, eventually the sunset of fossil fuels, and what's the replacement of that look like?
Wow.
So the Rolls Royces of the world and GE and
can't wait to get a hydrogen powered Rolls Royce.
Yeah, that's right. What would that look like?
You know what? Yeah, just check that employee parking lot here.
Yeah.
No,
really?
Let's just say bonuses are gonna be good this year.
Yeah. I didn't know they were gonna be that good.
You'll enjoy your restored Yugo, but so it from your perspective, is coming from the banking world. I mean, you touch upon a lot of different industry segments. Sure. It's kind of got to be interesting to be involved in so many areas at the same time. You have your focus, but you're dealing with this customer base that spans the gamut in terms of industries.
Yeah, so no doubt about it. I mean, that's, I think, what attracted me first to banking and then to TPC is that, each company has its own sort of way of ticking, and has its own customer base that, has sort of its own unique characteristics, and sort of figuring out how that works and how we can bring value to those conversations. That gets, that's what wakes me up in the morning.
Well, Charles, I'm interested to hear from your perspective at FotoFab. What are some things that you're excited about coming down the pike? What are
these new products? We're involved in, we talked about the different industries, electronics, defense. We see a lot of prototypes, and so we see kind of what companies are working towards.
All right, in the R&D space.
On R&D space.
Yeah.
So whether it's fuel cell or stuff going up into space, so we're seeing at the front end of that, what other companies are working on.
Very good.
So it's fun.
Very good.
So TPC has 2,000 unique customers every year. And that's across that 4 industry vertical, right? So you can really start to get your finger on the pulse of where people are investing and where the industry is going just by, like I mentioned earlier, following the customer.
Right.
Yeah.
So will TPC turn down business if they don't, if a customer probably doesn't fit those 4 industry segments?
I'm not a sales guy, so my sales director would kill me if I said, yeah, of course.
There'd be after more criteria than that to turn them down.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because I guess maybe some of their parts might be similar to what you're doing. And
FotoFab and some of the other etchers will also they'll dabble in decorative stuff as well. So one of my philosophies is that all companies started out small in your proverbial garage, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I try not to turn away from those because you never know who's going to be the next, very large company.
And how big is FotoFab now, employee-wise?
We have roughly just under 50 employees.
Wow. So, I mean, really, that is kind of a sweet spot for the industry.
Yeah. All on Belmont in Chicago?
We have 2 locations, one in Elk Grove, just on the western part of O'Hare.
Okay.
And that's a full tool and die shop. So we're making the blanks in Chicago via chemical etching, and we're doing the forming in Elk Grove Village.
The village of Elk Grove, where one of the few villages that have actually sponsored a college bowl. I think that was the Bahamas Bowl. I don't know.
They sponsored the Cubs too.
Do they? Well, there you go.
That's right. As they should.
the very aggressive suburbs of Chicago, trying to get your business. So, do the other companies within TPC reflect kind of the size of FotoFab?
Yeah, so I would say that the range is as small as 20 to as large as 300.
Okay.
So it's a pretty wide range, but that strike zone's really in that, call it 50 to 125 employees per site.
Right.
Is that the kind of company that you're like more than likely looking to acquire? That size of company?
Yeah, exactly right. Like, as we were talking about earlier, we acquire good companies. We're not turnaround guys. We acquire companies for the teams. So certainly there's, what the average age of the company that we acquire is something like 35 or 40 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So proven players.
Proven players, exactly right. But again, in that middle market sort of core manufacturing space.
Yeah. So, Lincoln asked a question about connective tissue, and just kind of looking through some of the players within TPC management, they do have legacy with some of the companies that have been brought into the fold. Yeah. So, that's obviously something TPC is interested in keeping those people, those founders around.
Yeah. It's not a buy and burn, and we don't have a bench of people to put in.
Right. It would seem that knowing that when you walk in the door, it would seem to engender a little bit more trust in you and maybe a little better conversation.
Right. The track record's there. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly right. Again, you think about the original entrepreneur who built this business, as Charlie said, from the garage. That brand to them is not just a brand. That's personal. Their life. Yeah, it's their personal. Yeah, it's personal to them.
Yeah.
So the first thing we say is that again, we're not private equity. We're going to keep the brand, and we would like to hear who's still going to stick around and who on your team is in it for the long haul. So yeah.
What is on the wish list in terms of maybe additional capabilities?
Boy, I think anything that's going to touch that hydrogen economy right now is certainly on the wish list. So that comes with certain coatings technologies, gasketing. We haven't talked yet about our advanced assembly capabilities, but there's a lot of very complex assemblies that go into these systems. So certainly I think that's going to be a focus in the near term.
Yeah. Who are some of those large players involved in that sector? Can you say?
Yeah, I think that if you look just sort of headlines wise, the large players are companies like Cummins or Siemens.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
Yeah, very large company.
With.
Yeah, household names. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting.
Plug Power.
Yeah. Do you see other opportunities outside of that probably hold as a greater return, perhaps?
So certainly, it's kind of fun. A lot of the technologies that we use have multiple end uses, right, or end use cases. And so thinking about a hydrogen electrolyzer, the bipolar plate stack, right, that's where we are in the heart of it. Essentially what that looks like is a very complex thermal management device. Okay. Right? We've been making thermal management devices for a long time, FotoFab being a perfect example of where we make those. You then extrapolate that across UPG, which is our plastics business, which focuses on primarily technology companies, and rack-mounted servers and switches and sort of utility level technologies. Right. As AI has continued to grow, thermal management continues to be a bigger piece of it. So we're taking learnings from the hydrogen economy and we're applying it to technology and AI. And it's kind of cool to the connective tissue comment to see how those technologies can service multiple end markets.
Yeah, sure. I think I've gotten a little bit more familiar with that data center business in terms of there's even locally there's some people involved, and you really don't realize what's occurring around you because they just finished I think the server farm out in DeKalb for Facebook. That's just for Facebook, the Amazon, Google, everybody's getting involved.
Just the sheer amount of heat, just physically, that's generated by a farm like that, I'm sure calls upon engineers to keep coming up with better solutions to that.
Exactly right. And AI just cranks that dial in a way that the whole world hasn't seen before, right?
Right. Yeah, we used to have conversations about, did you realize the part of that table was manufactured by a company down the road? And now you're like, do you realize you're able to surf that, website on your phone because fabricators have helped build the infrastructure to support all that activity.
Right. Yeah.
It's next time you're looking at your funny video about furry cats or something, thank your local fabricator.
Speak for yourself, Daniel.
While you're driving your Yugo.
Right. Exactly. There you go.
We're not living in the past around here. Don't get us wrong.
No, we're hitting the groove. Everybody's joining it. Are there challenges to your business that maybe don't affect standalone?
No, it's easy. It's easy every day.
Why are we even talking about that?
No, certainly. I think, from a global perspective, the pandemic taught a lot of people a lot of hard lessons about disinvestment in supply chain. So there was so much reinvestment in supply chain in the last couple of years.
Right.
And I think that, while we're this is a viewpoint, but while we're probably not going to go all the way back to fully as disinvested, if you will, as pre-pandemic, we are starting to see that pendulum kind of come back the other way. So if I was going to talk about a sort of global trend that I think is challenging for the manufacturing market as a whole, that's been one of the more challenging ones on the sort of tail end of the COVID hangover.
Yeah. Are your people within the organization getting as much face time as maybe they might have had with customers before the pandemic?
Well, Charlie, you do the best to answer.
Or is that even important nowadays with everyone's adopted Zoom and other digital technologies?
Being in front of a customer is just ideal.
Yeah,
that's the goal on the sales side of things. I would say it's improving, but you just go back 20 years and it's been more difficult.
Right.
Starting 2000 to get actual face-to-face time.
Yeah.
So that's we had a big blip in that, obviously, and I think it's come back up, but we're still on that trend of where it's difficult.
Do you find younger folks comfortable with the face-to-face, or you have to kind of wean them off their digital interfaces?
Yeah, you certainly got to teach and mentor.
Yeah, I think you made the comment earlier about photo etching, and we recently ran a story about tandem press brakes, and we had somebody slightly, probably in their 40s, post a comment on my LinkedIn feed like, "Wow, I've never seen this before," and I'm like, 2 press brakes next to each other. But yeah, I think that's what it is. There's just new people coming in, and you can't assume that something that's just been around forever that they have knowledge of it. So there's a lot of mentoring in terms of a lot of different aspects of this business.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. When you mentioned, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, in terms of the challenges of running so many companies within one fold, maybe can you talk about that and what that presents to you as a leader?
Yeah, sure. So there's no doubt that 13 plants in, 7 time zones, including China, there's certainly a communication challenge. So it's a discipline, just like anything else. And so we take a disciplined approach to that. We meet once a month as a senior leadership team with every head of every plant. And then from a functional department perspective, we meet at least that often, if not more often. And again, it's all about that connective tissue. And to Charlie's point about there being, 5 photo etchers in the portfolio where we have manufacturing expertise, we have, I think we call it the Photo Etch Council, where we're trading, best practice knowledge. And Charlie, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, it's just Christian mentioned. We get together and we're 4 or 5 separate small companies, but we have the breadth of knowledge that we're sharing and just improving after every conversation, just sharing knowledge as if we were individuals. We wouldn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, that sounds like very.
That's what TPC allows.
Yeah, it sounds very synergistic, just in its theory. It's like, hey, we're here to help each other grow, be better. It sounds.
And Lincoln, you had asked about the challenges of TPC and running the different companies. Certainly a lot of challenges, and I feel sorry for Christian because he's got to deal with this quite a bit.
Don't feel that sorry.
Yeah, don't worry, I don't.
I was only saying that for you guys.
He's just saying it. Right?
But there's so much room for improvement because we're learning how to be better, and we're learning how to, that connective tissue is starting to grow.
Yeah.
And as it's starting to expand and meld together, we're just going to be so much better off and just on knowledge.
Is that familiarity with your kind of coworkers that might be at other facilities?
Familiarity, building trust, and then bringing it down, not just from the leadership side, but from the quality, the operational sides, the sales side, and showing them that, hey, don't be afraid.
Right.
Talk, learn.
Right.
So why not try to just roll out one brand over all these facilities?
Well, for one, I think that each one of our existing brands has a solid brand equity, right? So it has its own niche in the marketplace that it's known for. FotoFab, for example, with rapid prototyping, or use Optiforms, for example, for electroforming and cold shields. And in the optics industry, that is a very well-known brand, and so there's a lot of equity there. I think that we certainly are co-branding. And we think that there's additional sort of brand equity to be brought to the table by saying FotoFab, a TPC company. And both of those things should come together and be a force multiplier for each other.
Right. I look at the business and see it as just a really neat way for some of these smaller shops to be a part of something bigger and not necessarily carry the load of having to grow. And does that get part of the conversation? Does that come into play for people that approach you, not only looking for the succession thing, but like, hey, this is going to be good for my employees as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, from the customer side too, you think about a large Fortune 100 company that's coming to a single site, 50 employee, company with a $50 million opportunity, right? It would be very challenging, without the support of TPC to be able to execute on something like that, where we can, have these 20, 30, 40-year relationships, and then continue to be able to drive capital and operational expertise to grow those products through maybe where the individual site could.
So what was the last acquisition for the company?
Last acquisition was UPG, which was exciting. You ask about where we look for capability adds. UPG was the first time we've gone into plastics and composites. Everything prior to that has been largely metal with some specialty materials mixed in there, ceramics and whatnot. But UPG was a very large play into plastics, which, part of our strategy is our go-to-market strategy is, what does it connect to? What does it go into? Right. And so many of these, metal components are going into plastic housings. They're going into,
absolutely.
It's the two materials are obviously synergistic. So we've seen some early successes in the last, I guess we just passed the year mark. We bought them in October of last year.
Okay.
And we're already seeing that, particularly in that data center space. So we're cross-selling in metal componentry into where we were just doing, server technology.
Will they be assembling those within the UPG facilities or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. In most cases.
So some of the sheet metal work being done by other family members will get sent to those UPG.
Yeah, exactly. And the one I'm referencing here is Pinnacle Precision, which is in Anaheim, California. It's awesome. Doing the metal work that's going to go into UPG product.
So is there a reason why TPC has a nice concentration of companies in California? Is it the type of business? The only reason I ask is because I've heard from other companies, you hear about the migration from California to other states, and obviously historically somewhat difficult to do business there. But yet that what caught my eye is like, wow, you had this kind of concentration right there in Southern California.
Sure. So there's a real economic reason, right, around the engineering talent, particularly around aerospace and defense and medical. So certainly that migration has been a real force in the last couple of years, but there's still so much talent out there.
Oh, and the concentration's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
No.
So another recent expansion for one of your companies was L&T in Mexico. We kind of touched upon that pretty at the beginning of this conversation. Can you touch upon that, and why is that important for the not only L&T but maybe the organization?
Yeah, so it's following that nearshoring trend. So again, customers were telling us they wanted to simplify the supply chain, get it closer to home. We already had that concentration in Southern California. Half of our management employees for L&T live closer to the Tijuana facility than they do to the Poway facility.
Oh, wow.
So it's very naturally synergistic just from a labor pool perspective.
And travel back and forth between the countries is
simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about when you're looking forward, maybe the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, what are some markets that maybe in the 4 that you're already serving, or elsewhere that you find more intriguing than others?
Certainly, that clean energy piece is going to be a focus of our investment. And,
is that worldwide?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So we're in discussions, frankly, about how do we nearshore in some of those other 2 markets relative to clean energy as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Very good.
And that's keeping an eye on developments here, kind of tangent to that.
Yeah, it's funny. So
particularly when it relates to like actual material mining, and they're trying to bring that home, or at least. Can you bring it home if it's here in the ground? But you know what I mean, like centralize that activity here in the North America.
Sure. So for a long time, Europe was, frankly, a little ahead of us, from a clean energy investment perspective. The U.S. in the last 24 months or so, or give it a little bit, maybe more than that, has continued to push the accelerator on that and try and catch up. So some of these technologies were developed in Europe and then they were brought here to the U.S. to grow, and we're shipping then back off to Europe.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you have a good feel for the next year? We're kind of getting inklings from some of the people in our community that they kind of fear for a slowdown in 2024. Do you kind of get a sense of that or not?
I think for us, you got headlines like 5.2% GDP growth for third quarter, right? So, and I think in the global perspective, the downstream demand characteristics are still largely good.
Yeah.
For us, where we operate in the middle market, I think that we've been experiencing a little bit of a rolling recession as it is.
Yeah.
So it's sort of hit different industry segments at different times, which thankfully it's not all at the same time, right? But I think that we're very much optimistic about 24. I think a lot of that disinvestment in supply chains has, the slack in the system has started to come out. And so we are seeing, order volumes and quotes start to rise for 24. And then, investing in broader economic trends like nearshoring and like the hydrogen economy, those are sort of overdrive levers that we can pull, right? And so
absolutely.
That's where we're going to focus our activity.
Well, some people even been talking about a factory boom. I don't know if that's the correct term, but I mean, in terms of figure out new ways domestically to take care of some of that, slack demand that is now, as you say, loosening up.
Yeah. So CHIPS Act is another perfect example there, right? So that's $50 billion earmarked to bring technology manufacturing back here.
Right.
I think everybody learned a very hard way how hard it can be to get chips.
When they're so centralized in Taiwan, it's can be difficult.
Don't take away anyone's phone.
Exactly.
That's what they want.
Exactly.
Manufacturing in Chicago, how's that experience, Charles?
I don't, people ask that to me on occasion, and you have regulations. You're a good corporate, neighbor, and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's, you're following regulations and being a steward.
Yeah, and the regulations would apply to like stormwater or emissions.
Stormwater, just whether it's emissions, emissions in the air or water, is MWRD.
Yeah. Do you? How has the challenge been for recruiting? I don't know, maybe bringing people into the company fold.
Well, is that kind of a canned question there? Because it's a bear.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a bear.
Yeah.
Definitely seeing things loosen up over the last 6 months or so. But we have the advantage of that. We actually have very low turnover. So it hasn't been that big of an issue. Back in the crunch about 3 years ago, we saw a little bit of uptick, as everybody did. I think some companies saw a huge uptick, and we saw a little bit. So low turnover and treating your employees is helps out with that.
Right. Yeah. The reason I asked that question is just the nature of Chicago as a beacon for younger people to move in. Then does that what roles are we talking more like college grads or people who are looking just for looking for jobs? But it sounds like you almost equate yourself as any other manufacturer in any other location. It's like no different.
Right. Yeah. And manufacturers, we got the problem. It's not a fancy glass building that college grads want to jump into.
Right.
But,
and you've got a very niche industry to begin with.
Yeah,
with 10 to 12 manufacturers nationwide.
Right.
I mean, how does a young person find out about you or that segment of manufacturing in general?
We're gearing towards whether it's on the admin side and the sales side, we're gearing towards engineer-minded people.
Sure.
So that's what we're looking at, coming out of college or have that experience.
Yeah.
And we were talking before we went live with our conversation, but you work with some of the folks at DePaul in kind of reaching out to them. Do they have a chance to understand what you do for a living?
I hope so.
Do they have to see it? I guess that's my point. To see it is believing.
Yeah, especially at DePaul per se. They're not a big engineering manufacturing type university, so it's a little bit different for them.
Yeah, I'll never forget the conversation I had with a fabricator in Silicon Valley and bringing in engineering students from San Jose State, and then you mentioned Stanford. I'm like, you got to explain metal fabricating to Stanford people? Aren't they supposed to know everything already? And not to belittle like the people that went to the state university, but there's just a lack of knowledge, no matter what educational degree they might have. quite a bit to learn about. And I think a lot of it there's a lot of upside to people that want to get involved.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned the changing of the guard, right? I mean, that's been the trend in manufacturing for some time now.
Sure.
And so hopefully this renaissance of U.S. manufacturing that is sort of in its budding stages will help drive engagement there. And from our perspective, we're very disciplined about it, right?
Right.
We set up programs with colleges, right? UC Davis and our plant in San Jose have a very tight relationship. And again, it's to cultivate those engineering resources early, help them get some real hands-on experience through internships and whatnot, and then hopefully bring them into the industry.
Well, and this maybe sort of counteracts some negative stereotypes about what manufacturing is, and get them familiarized with things that not only are but could be. With talent like theirs, they could have a whole lot. There's a big ceiling there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we're fortunate we get to work on some pretty fun projects, right? Whether it's like electron gun therapy for cancer treatment, or putting satellites in space. Like that's something that gets a 22-year-old excited, I think. Right?
Sure.
Yeah, and that might just be Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the end of the week, it could move on to something else, like you said.
Yeah. And TPC brand, that's adds more excitement to it as well. You get some really neat customers we're working for, saving lives, doing some cool engineering things, and there's room for advancement within the organization.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that all helps with that, recruitment.
Yeah. Obviously, when it comes to, we've talked about new acquisitions, obviously the company's probably looking at potential other ones. Does the organization look at manufacturing in North America in a very bullish point of view?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been here the whole time, right? We've talked about, average age of 35, 40 years. So it's kind of funny that, it's in vogue now. We kind of raise our hands like, we've been here doing this.
You've seen cycles.
Yeah.
And cycles caused by non-manufacturing entities. So I mean, if you kind of look at it,
Factors.
Manufacturing's kind of done it's been a slow build, but I think we're at an exciting point, particularly in North America. Yeah, in terms of a global comparison. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
This has been fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for having us.
For us, it's important because I think it shows how the manufacturing environment in North America is maturing, and it's maturing with the involvement of small to mid-sized organizations that pretty much represent a majority of manufacturing in North America. Certainly. And TPC, you had mentioned, $200 million company, obviously with plans to kind of grow that. So it's big business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks for
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before we go, I always forget this. Where can we find you on the internet?
Yep. So it's thepartnercos.com.
Okay.
And that has links to all of our manufacturing sites and all the capabilities. So it's a good central resource.
And FotoFab?
Including FotoFab.
Okay.
FotoFab.com, that begins with an F, FOTOFAB.
That's a good name. I did not forget that name. It's
Get the alliteration going.
Yeah, I am prone to forgetting a lot of things, including this. This is my favorite part of the show. And you can, if you have comments, questions, complaints, you can send them to podcast@fmamfg.org. All right, I got it right. It only took 50 episodes. Also, please go to where you get your podcast, rate, review, subscribe, and recommend us to others. And we appreciate your time. Thank you and goodbye.
So long.
The Fabricator Podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association, located in Elgin, Illinois. The show is hosted by Dan Davis and the staff of FMA Communications. The podcast is produced by Gareth Slager and recorded and edited with the help of Brandon Geyer. Sales support provided by Andy Flando. Additional production support by Elizabeth Gavin, Dana Weicker, Mary Diamond, Mike Owens, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.